Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Always glad to have this guy back. He's a former federal agent. He's a guy who has a vast knowledge of the border and what's happening between Mexico and the United States right there along the Rio Grande and beyond. It's Victor Avila. Victor, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing good, Joe. Thanks for having me back.
Always appreciate having you on. VictorAvilaSpeaks.com is his website. Make sure you go there. I know that you're just back from the border, but I want to start in Arizona. You're just back from the Texas border with Mexico. But in Arizona, you've got President Joe Biden speaking about some chip plant or something. I think that it's actually a foreign-owned chip plant by like Thailand or something. But either way, he goes there, and he's right there by the border again. Victor, I went back through his history as a senator, as the vice president, and as the president. Joe Biden has never been to our southern border, ever. He drove past it. He went from El Paso over to a part of New Mexico. So they were on I-10. I guess he could have looked to the left and seen Mexico. But the guy's never stopped and said a word there. Why do you think that is?
Because they can't defend it, Joe. I just came back from the border, and I've been to Arizona as well. If they go to the border, they will not be able to have an excuse and continue to ignore the chaos that is happening down there under their own policies. That's why they refuse to go down there. And frankly, it's an insult to the tens of thousands of border agents, HSI agents, and every federal agency that works on the border to secure our homeland, for him to say that there's something more important than that. What can be more important than protecting our homeland and our sovereignty, especially with the problem that we have with fentanyl and the crisis of illegal immigration?
For those who didn't hear it earlier, when President Biden was asked why he's not going to the border, he said because there are more important things to do. When it comes to not only just the southern border, but this country as a whole, the fentanyl problem killing over 100,000 people a year, the human and sex trafficking of little kids across the border, you're seeing 5 million people in less than 2 years come across illegally. What's more important than that, Victor?
It's not Ukraine, I'll tell you that.
Right.
But we send people down there, we send billions of dollars, but they will not give it the importance. It's our southern border, our own protection, our own line with Mexico and the imminent threat that we face from the cartels. Let me tell you, I was just 4 days. I spent 4 days in Eagle Pass and Del Rio. It is chaotic. You will not recognize the United States of America of people from all over the world walking into this country without any restriction whatsoever. And I found out as well, Joe, that people, illegal aliens are being processed on the Mexican side. That's right. NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, have been given the authority and the power to process with Border Patrol paperwork, and we're calling these paroles. They call them paroles. I used to have the authority to issue these as a special agent. You cannot do that. And they've been giving paroles to people on the Mexican side. They're walking across a legal port of entry, pre-processed, and walking in.
They're given paperwork by NGOs. They're not government organizations, and they're doing the paperwork as if they are part of ICE or the Border Patrol. I'm not sure I understand. They're in Mexico processing people, and the people walk across the border and go, hey, look, I got processed.
That's right. They're going up to the U.S. Customs Inspector, and they're showing these yellow envelopes. And guess what? They already have the paperwork. They already have the permit, and they're allowed to walk in. And they're acting so like some quasi embassy or consulate,
yes,
which is completely illegal to do that. But I want people to understand this is where they're coming. They're coming through the port of entry, underneath, in between the ports of entry, in the river, all places, in the desert in Arizona, with no restriction whatsoever. And the problem here is the national security and public safety issue is that they're not vetting these people properly. I followed buses from the processing center in Eagle Pass after they're released, are dropped off to this NGO center in Eagle Pass, Texas, where there was over 500 illegals now waiting to get their bus tickets and airline tickets to hit the rest of the country. I interviewed a lot of them. A lot of them are coming over from Nicaragua, from Venezuela, from Colombia. And guess what? They owe the cartels the money. In one case, the Nicaraguan national says that he owes them $8,500. That's what they charge them to come over, and he owes them that money. He has to pay that $1,000 a month when he gets to Minneapolis. And if he doesn't pay the $1,000 on time, he gets fined $300, like an interest fee. And then if he doesn't pay anything, they'll take his home and kill his parents. This is what he told me directly. This is what smuggling turns into trafficking. I also quickly saw a 5-year-old come across the river by herself with a Ziploc bag with instructions of where to go in the United States, completely by herself, an unaccompanied minor. The trafficking is continuing right before our eyes. and no one in this administration, no one in any political aspect, either left or right, is doing anything about it.
Victor Avila speaks. It's Victor Avila, former federal agent, also an expert on the border. Victor, as a former law enforcement officer, how exactly is this not aiding and abetting the cartels? How is Joe Biden and Mayorkas and everybody who is complicit here, Kamala Harris, how are they not aiding and abetting sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking? I mean, they literally are, aren't they?
It's exactly that. They're aiding and abetting. They're complicit in this whole activity. I tell you what, Joe, I stood there and I don't know what the agenda is anymore. At first I thought, well, they're getting all these people for votes. Maybe that's still the truth. I don't know what it is other than changing our country, fundamentally changing our country, because these people are coming to bring their countries here. They're not assimilating to the U.S. and we are doing things about it. I'm working with an organization called the America Project. We filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration, against Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, to compel them. They're representing ranchers, property owners that have had enough. They have their fences cut. They have their properties damaged. They've lost thousands of dollars, and they have brought suit on behalf of them to compel. They don't want any money. They want the Biden administration to be told by a judge, a federal judge, to do their job and follow our Constitution, follow our legislatively passed laws, which are completely ignored right now.
I think that you would know this better than most. Recently, Governor Abbott here in Texas said that it was an invasion, and there's an invasion clause in the Constitution, and he says he's going to put the Texas National Guard down there. You and I both know that the Texas National Guard have been down there for a long time, but they had no enforcement capabilities. They couldn't arrest. They couldn't do anything. They were just there, I guess, as a show of force. Has anything changed since the governor said this is an invasion? Is there now any enforcement by our own National Guard? Texas is being invaded.
Unfortunately, absolutely not. That invasion that was declared by our governor meant nothing. One of the reasons why I went down there is I wanted to verify, in fact, if anything had changed. I stood with the Texas DPS and National Guard as we all observed the Border Patrol take custody and process them. Several groups, separate groups of over 250 up to plus 400 people. And I'm thinking, well, the invasion has been declared. Why isn't the DPS doing what they were supposed to do, and the National Guard, and repel? That's what the invasion allows you to do, to repel the people at the river right there and not allow them to come in,
right,
or even maybe then take them to the port of entry and return them back to Mexico. But nothing has been done with that declaration. Has just been words at this point by our governor.
I mean, would there be some sort of a conflict? Because I know that the Border Patrol agents, the front line, agree with you and me. I know that the management, of course, are a bunch of idiots, and by that I mean Mayorkas and those who are controlling it, whatever the policies are that are being put forth. Would there be a conflict, though, if DPS and the Texas National Guard did what you said, apprehended, then brought them back and said, goodbye, go back to Mexico? Because they literally can do that now with the invasion clause, as you said. Would there be a conflict? Would Border Patrol then somehow have a confrontation with the Texas authorities or not?
No, let me tell you, I talked to the border agents. They were welcoming, they were waiting for and hoping that Texas would step up and actually do that, because they want to do that. That's exactly what they want to do with their own jobs, but they're not allowed to do it under Mayorkas and Biden. So I think that if Texas would actually start doing the enforcement, by the way, there was no operational plan here. I mean, when I did it in my career, something as big as this task, you would have things in place before you would declare the invasion, but none of that has changed. You know, you heard about some of these tanks being sent down there. I saw some heavy equipment, but nothing has changed absolutely. But I'll tell you what, I think that the Border Patrol agents, if they saw the state of Texas DPS troopers and State Guard start doing this and this actual enforcement, they would then get the backup of Border Patrol and say, well, we're probably assisting the state of Texas to do it. I think they would get the help from the border agents and hopefully get together in unity and kind of a solidarity of law enforcement and say, you know what, we're not going to pay attention to the Biden administration anymore. We're going to continue to uphold the oath that we took and defend the borders. And but they haven't had the opportunity to do that because no one is doing anything about it.
It is Victor Avila. Go to victoravilaspeaks.com. He's a former federal agent. He was involved in that shootout that ended up killing Jaime Zapata, his partner, with a Mexican drug cartel. His partner was killed, and I guess you were also shot with Fast and Furious guns, which was an Obama operation with Eric Holder, sneaking guns into Mexico, and bad guys got a hold of them. And again, I appreciate you coming on and talking about what's happening at the border. Do you believe, like I do, that they're not sending Kamala Harris went to El Paso, but you're from El Paso. She was 9 miles from the border. She never never went to the border, didn't see a border facility, stopped, waved, took some pictures, and then went to California. Biden's never been. Mayorkas goes, and the Border Patrol turns their back on him because he's that incredibly either incapable or he's doing this on purpose. But is the reason why they're not actually going, the vice president and the president, because of plausible deniability? If they go, they have to admit what they see.
That's absolutely right. You can't deny. You can't deny. I went there. I continue to go there, and it would take you 5 minutes to realize what they are doing.
Right.
They would then be responsible to tell the American people that what's happening at the border is because of their policies. I hear them say all the time they're trying to fix what Trump left behind and this whole nonsense, which is completely untrue. It's the Biden administration's policies of getting rid of Remain in Mexico. And wait till Title 21 is lifted on December 21st at midnight. I hear there's groups of 15,000 on the other side of Mission, Texas, and Tamaulipas, Mexico. And there's a group of a bunch of people waiting for Title 21 to be lifted officially, and that's the day it's going to happen. There will be nothing left in our arsenal of our own laws, of our own abilities to hold people back. And they're coming in droves, Joe. And that's why they won't go down there, because they want it that way. They've decided purposefully and deliberately to have it this way.
What's interesting to me is I didn't know that they were processing people in Mexico, Victor. What's interesting to me is that seems to be, it would take away the ability of Texas or Arizona or California, not that they would, or New Mexico, to claim there's an invasion. It's not an invasion. I've been processed. I've claimed asylum. I'm going to go and get a court date. So do you think that they're doing an end around to make sure that the states can't do anything?
That's a great point, because those numbers, by the way, will no longer be counted as encounters or be counted as illegals. All of a sudden, all those numbers do not add up because they're not illegal. Technically not illegal. They're coming in with a permit. And I want to say something about the term invasion. Invasion has nothing to do with immigration. If you think about it, people think, well, if you declare the invasion, it's against the people and the illegal aliens coming in. Actually, it's an invasion of a lot of things, of the cartel, of terrorism, of an invasion of our Constitution, an invasion of our sovereignty. That's why the Declaration of Invasion is so important. I wish Abbott would, and I hope that he still does, consider then moving on actionable things on the Declaration, because he just sent out a personal tweet where at this point hasn't meant anything. I want to see the action of the DPS troopers. I spoke to a lot of troopers down at the border all the way up to Midland, Texas. They're not even aware. Some were not even aware that their own boss declared an invasion.
Wow.
So there hasn't been disseminated down to the troops down on the line. They have no idea what's going on. As a matter of fact, none of the troops, the DPS troopers that were there last year from all over the state, they haven't been sent back. It just tells me that there was no plan in place to actually enforce the declaration when it came down. So we're anxiously waiting for something to happen. It might take something legislatively when the session starts next year. We'll see if that changes anything, but I'm hoping I'll continue to go down there and let you know what happens.
Victor, the name of the book is Agent Under Fire, right?
That's right, Agent Under Fire.
Make sure you go and get his book, Agent Under Fire. His name is Victor Avila. Avila is his last name. Let me ask you about something you just brought up. This is an invasion of the cartels. It's also an invasion of MS-13. It's a potential invasion of Middle Eastern terrorists. We have no idea who's here. But let me ask you very specifically about the cartels. There is no doubt at this point that they've got cartel houses all over this country now. The cartel is actively operational in America now.
100% true. They're everywhere and 45 countries abroad. They have a heavy presence, not just in Texas and the border towns, but everywhere, with the fentanyl, the meth, cocaine making a huge comeback. I mean, they're pouring these drugs, heroin, coming in on a daily basis, in between the ports of entry, through the ports of entry, everywhere, killing us. Of the 110,000 deaths that we have of these overdose deaths, 65% are attributed 100% to fentanyl and the counterfeit pills. I talk a lot about the losing of our youth with one pill. DA has a great program going on, One Pill Kills, to get people aware and have the parents talk to their kids about the experimenting with drugs. A lot of these kids are not even drug users per se. And so you have that's the real epidemic. They're killing us through the cartels, through China. That's the invasion, the threat that we face from China gaining control, through Mexico, through the cartels, buying our territory, buying our lands, 140,000 acres near the Laughlin Air Force Base there in Del Rio. It's happening, this invasion is happening in many bigger ways than people think. The distraction is the number of people and the hundreds and thousands of people crossing every day. El Paso has a huge problem right now, overcapacity at these detention facilities. And guess what? The Biden administration doesn't want to hold them. They're moving them out as quickly as possible because they want to avoid that 17,000 under the bridge that we saw last year in Del Rio. So they're pushing people out. We have a big issue with sponsors. We don't know who the sponsors are, especially when it comes to the kids. If somebody says, I want this child in Chicago, no one is checking that address in Chicago to see what the next of kin relationship is to this child. And so we have a trafficking problem. I mean, it's a huge issue, and it's too late when your family or someone in the interior of the U.S. becomes a victim of a crime at the hands of these illegal aliens, like many angel moms and dads have. And that's the reality that the communities, local communities, are suffering with crime, schools, healthcare, criminal justice system. The impact is happening as we speak.
It's happening everywhere in every corner of this country. It's Victor Avila. Go to VictorAvilaSpeaks.com. Maybe 30 seconds left, Victor, but you talk to the residents down there. The Democrats make the mistake of thinking because somebody is Hispanic ethnically, then they're all for illegal immigration. Of course they're not. And those who live along the border, they've been depleted of all their resources. These border towns are just decimated by this. What are the individuals who live there saying to you?
They are completely fed up. And yes, most of them are Hispanic. Most of them are ranchers. Most of them are tired of dealing with their cattle, having to move their cattle from feeding on their own property to a different property because they keep on eating all the debris and trash that the illegal aliens leave behind. The dead bodies that they find, sometimes in decomposed conditions, the rollovers, the chases through their county, through their properties, they are just completely feel ignored by this administration, and they're wondering, we're United States citizens here. Why aren't we being heard? Why isn't this administration, from all different levels, by the way, paying attention to what's happening down here? Because it's affecting them tremendously. It's affecting these communities in many different ways, in their businesses, in their commerce, and the relationship with Mexico is a big one. I know Biden's going to Mexico. He's not going to have the conversation that I would have with AMLO, the president of Mexico. He's going to have a very different one that probably allows Mexico to continue to do what they're doing. But Mexico needs to be held accountable for what they're not doing in Mexico. Right. And so there's a lot of issues to look at here when it comes to border security.
Victor, I appreciate you coming on. Victor Avila Speaks. It's Victor Avila, former federal agent. Thanks a million, my brother. We'll talk again very soon.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. We're back after this. Stay right here.